everyone. So I think we've all heard, the old adage, innovate or die. It's commonly taught in business class. You can see it quoted in Instagram posts. It's all over the internet. Innovate or die. And there's no innovation if you operate out of fear of the new or untested, said Mr. Bob Iger in his memoir, sharing lessons he'd learned in his 15 years at the Walt Disney Company. I think this is an important adage that helps a lot of young startups. And disruptive innovation is what blockchain is all about. But I think there's another twist on this phrase we want to coin. I believe protocols will need to embrace the coming storm of decentralized finance in order to remain relevant for the next 3 years. And thus, you either need to DeFi or die. So today, rather than talking about, complex code or audits, I'm going to take a different twist. I want to walk you through the story of a project that had to reinvent itself in order to remain relevant, and how you as developers and core team members and working on protocols, how you can take these skills and apply them to your own chains. So first, customary, a bit about myself. So hi, I'm Christy. I've worked on a few things in the space. Mostly I've stuck to the proof of work side of things, working on optimized cryptocurrency miners since 2010, working on hardware, designing ASICs, working on a different side of the ecosystem. In 2017, I worked on a proof of work algorithm for Ethereum called ProgPow. And I've worked at a lot of the large infrastructure companies in this space, managing engineering teams of hundreds, to even working for Leica, a famous luxury designer camera brand, and working on their Lights Phone 1 launch in Japan. Also have worked with Genesis Mining and built massive infrastructure over in China. Why is this all relevant? Well, building infrastructure can teach you a lot about how to build a successful blockchain product, and tell you a lot about how to build a sustainable brand. In July, I joined the core development team of Symbol and NEM, which was a shock to many folks from the Ethereum ecosystem and many folks from the proof of work space. So NEM as a protocol is what I would call one of the first generation protocols. They're from 2015. And a lot of its main innovations were a consensus algorithm that sought to reward on-chain activity, aggregate transactions, so a way to quickly batch computational logic together, as well as on-chain royalties. Now keep in mind, 2015, this was quite innovative for the time. And NEM took off in viral popularity over in a different kind of user base. It's commonly used over in Japan, Korea, and China. In 2021, the core development team launched Symbol, which was planned as an on-chain upgrade, but eventually became its own blockchain protocol. It shared a lot of similarities to its predecessor, along with a new architecture that was inspired by LMAX's Disruptor, which some of the engineers in the audience might know as the NASDAQ backend. And joining the team was definitely an interesting challenge. NEM has fallen in popularity and use over the years, but what was interesting was this was a chance to reinvent a blockchain protocol, to breathe new life into it. So as I mentioned, NEM is what I would call one of the first era blockchain protocols. And there's 4 eras of blockchain protocols. There's Bitcoin, the first era, Bitcoin era. This gave us the distributed ledger. It gave us peer-to-peer money. It gave us proof of work, and it taught us good mechanism design. There was the second era of blockchains. So this was Ethereum, which gave us smart contracts. It gave us extensibility, and it taught us how to do collaborative development in real time. It was the third era of ICOs. These were alternative, sometimes really creative financing opportunities. And a lot of these products promised a new financial framework or a new financial market. Many of them are starting to realize that promise only today. And then there's the fourth era of blockchain protocols, what I would call the DeFi era, the native DeFi apps. These combine a lot of the lessons from the previous three eras and innovate and reinvent on that. So DeFi builds on these three major waves and it improves. And part of its attraction, part of the reason that it's attracting so much investment, so many VCs, is that it enables finally the promise of blockchain to be realized, allowing anyone in the world to lend, borrow, send, or trade assets using just a digital wallet without having to work with a middleman or work with a bank. If they wish, they can even explore even more advanced financial activities, leverage trading, structured products, synthetic assets, insurance underwriting, market making, while always retaining complete control. This is a big contrast to, the traditional financial instruments of today, where you lose custody of your assets, or you're not even sure that if you're actually trading with your own money. And DeFi's two foundational qualities, permissionless and transparency, translate to these multiple powerful use cases. One is lowering the barrier to entry, slashing switching costs, providing optionality. A great example is the rise of exchange aggregators. So these use public APIs in order to tap into multiple liquidity opportunities. And they split orders across lots of different platforms to provide end users with the best possible exchange rate. In just a matter of months, we've seen a huge surge of these aggregators that have stormed into the DeFi space. Another is, auditable accounting. So ensuring that DeFi products have their capital reserves can be viewable by anyone at any time in the world. This allows for really rigorous risk assessment and also risk management. For anyone building a money market product or credit facilities or repo-like platforms, this allows users to inspect both the quality of the collateral portfolio as well as the extent of leverage in the system at any time. We can contrast this, to the opaque nature of the current financial system, the thing that kickstarted Bitcoin's development. It was only after that global financial crisis of 2007, 2008 that analysts and regulators actually began to understand the ratio of loans to deposits the US had, which, it hit 3.5, double what the second most highly leveraged banking system in the world, Russia, had. It also solves the principal agent problem. So, in something like MakerDAO, Maker tokens are able to earn interest paid by borrowers. And in the event of insolvency or defaults, they serve as the primary backstop. These Maker tokens are automatically printed and sold out in the market to cover losses. This programmatic enforcement creates very strict accountability, forcing Maker holders to set sensible collateral and liquidation parameters. And the alternative, loose risk management practices, puts Maker holders at risk of dilution. So there's all these interesting little applications and use cases that have started to emerge from DeFi, slowly replacing the traditional financial instruments. And this, by far, is one of the most powerful use cases of blockchain that we're seeing today. So it's a commonly held thesis that, in order to be a successful DeFi product, you need to solve scalability. You need to have a clear regulatory framework. You need to be sufficiently decentralized. I actually contest this. I think these things are important, but what seems to be common in all successful DeFi products is really three key things. The first being great mechanism design. Figuring out how to incentivize your users to coordinate around a common goal. It is an art, and one as developers that you need to learn to hone and bring to life in your products. You want all the users in your network to behave in a socially desirable way that enables your protocol to flourish and attracts even more individuals. There's also great user experience. One of the common ingredients to success across all of the DeFi products now is fantastic UX. This isn't just pretty pictures. This isn't just your UI. This isn't just great design. It's a combination of things, as well as the storytelling that goes into some of these platforms, as well as sensible tooling, detailed documentation, well-commented code. The final thing is great assets. Your users need something to trade. So yes, you can, you can have cross-chain liquidity, and this is important. You want your users to be able to tap into, the greatest liquidity pool in the world, Bitcoin. You want them to be able to tap into Ethereum. You want them to be able to tap into all of these different altcoins. This is one fundamental piece to building a DeFi protocol or reinventing yourself and embracing DeFi. But there's another end to that. There's also other kinds of assets. NFTs are currently taking the world by storm right now. And it's not because they have inherent value, just because they're listed. It's that individuals have created value around these products. That's one of the key takeaways when you're trying to embrace DeFi. The market decides the value. You don't have to figure out that utility. You don't have to focus on inherently creating utility in the token. Your users will often do it for you. So let's go take a look at some of the examples of this. What does good mechanism design look like? So we can use Bitcoin as, one of the first key examples. So mechanism design, it's really simple. It's broken into 3 steps. Every single thing you do with your protocol, every single thing you build, every tool has to have these 3 steps, these 3 pillars built into it natively. The first is that you need to choose a goal, an outcome that you want from doing the task. And so in the case of Bitcoin, it was all about maximizing network security to avoid double spends. The second thing you want is to choose a reward mechanism. So what are you going to give your users for completing this task? In the case of Bitcoin, it was distributing Bitcoin relative to the work that each miner contributed. The third pillar is you need to choose a reward function. What is the outcome of all of this reward? And for miners, this was assembling transactions, producing blocks, accepting blocks, and avoiding forks. And so we can see this good mechanism design reflective in pretty much all of the major consensus protocols that are used today. Proof of stake, proof of importance, proof of space-time, proof of storage. But mechanism design doesn't just have to be consensus algorithms. It can also be governance tokens. DAOs allow people to rally around a common goal, be rewarded for completing that goal, and they're able to attract more individuals in, and they share in the collective growth of the DAO and the collective success of projects. Fractionalized NFTs are also a great example of mechanism design. They allow users who could not enter into holding a certain asset to invest with what they can afford and share in the collective growth of that asset with others. So good mechanism design is really all about ensuring your network is addictive to participate in, that you feel like you're going to get rewarded. And it's absolutely critical that you have this and that you continue to build and stack incentives on incentives. There's so many protocols and projects out there that have forgotten this. So what does good UX look like? So I've chosen actually 3 examples that are a bit uncommon. Good UX isn't just about how pretty your UI is. It's about designing for your audience. It's about bringing something fresh and unique to the table. We've got over 8,500 tokens right now across all of the markets in the world today. And so in order to remain relevant and to attract individuals, you have to do something that is slightly unique. So Curve is a great example of what good UX looks like. It was catering to an audience who already understood liquidity swaps and DeFi products, and it wanted to provide something new that allowed them to stand out from the highly polished, sleek interfaces that were common in Ethereum during those days. wanted to add something new, fresh, and exciting, and it wanted to be immediately recognizable so it could stand out. So they adopted this Windows 90, 95-esque interface, and honestly, it's stuck. It's recognizable for their brand. It's simple, it's stripped away all of the noise. Users can just jump in and do what they want. Osmosis is another great example. So Osmosis was having a hard, Osmosis as a product needed to be able to quickly attract attention. And in the 2021 crowd, which is, really attracted to flashy bright lights, colorful art, stories, and honestly, a crowd that tends to be grouped with the gamer demographic. So how they've managed to create fantastic UX is they've invented a world and a story and art all around their products. It lets them stand out on Twitter. It lets users share their art. It lets users engage in them. So it's really important that as a protocol, you do not try to conform a lot to, the traditional financial crowd. You don't try to conform and make yourself, aesthetically pleasing to banks or enterprise or traditional businesses. That doesn't work. That doesn't make you stand out from the space. And it doesn't also reflect the spirit of crypto. Finally, there's Exodus. So Exodus as a product knew what it wanted to be. It wanted to be the world's leading multi-asset wallet. And they achieved that by ensuring that everything that a user would ever need to do with their coins could be done just from their interface. They have native in-coin swapping. They have allowing you to see, all of your assets over time. They have a native Etherscan built in. They allow you to purchase new assets. They allow you to stake. They allow you to drop your tokens into pools. It is your all-in-one interface for interacting with the chain. So they've stripped out all of the noise and they've really focused on, again, targeting and catering to their audience, not trying to be anything else. They haven't pursued, a Chrome extension or a Firefox extension because they don't need to compete with MetaMask. They don't need to try to copy or be another protocol, another product. So that's also a really important lesson. Remain relevant, remain flashy, be bold, be different. And so then let's talk about assets, because this is probably one of the most unique ways that in today you can attract new individuals to your protocol. So Loot is a very interesting NFT that is currently on Ethereum. It dropped about 5 days ago. And it's just a text file on a black background. It's a randomly generated fantasy adventurer loot sets. What is so interesting about this and why it's worth tens of thousands of dollars is because it's flipped the idea of an NFT on its head. It's essentially an NFT building block. The community has rallied around these in order to build an open source RPG in real time on Twitter. The community has decided to create their own utility for the NFT. And that's the important takeaway for a lot of the up and coming assets that we're starting to see now. You don't need your asset to have utility out of the gate. Your market will create their own utility. And chances are that if it's going to be traded, people are going to find value in it. So when you're embracing DeFi, it's not just enough to just have, collateralized or wrapped assets. It's not just enough to have bridges. It's not just enough to have liquidity mining. You also need a healthy, myriad of data and tokens and other kinds of things that humans would find valuable or interesting to trade, collect, and swap. Money isn't enough. So DeFi can't replace centralized finance for now. There's often a phrase that DeFi will eat the world, and I also contest that. There's always going to be a need for direct to fiat and retail onboarding. But that isn't really the purpose of DeFi. DeFi is not meant to completely replace exchanges. Blockchain's always been about removing friction, and this is really what DeFi complements. So, it can focus, DeFi is about optimization and acceleration of our existing financial infrastructure. We can automate KYC checks and remove the middlemen using zero knowledge proofs. We can focus on preventing front running with threshold encryption, embracing the dark forest, as the Ethereans call it. We can focus on creating private order books so there's no front running possible. We can focus on creating great mechanism design that enables us to continue on to an economic flywheel. There's some great examples of this. Hermes, is an up and coming private ZK EVM that has just been acquired by Polygon. They embraced ZK rollups in their design. There's Shutter, which allows orders to be sent to a dark forest and uses threshold encryption to prevent any kind of front running. There's even Chainlink FFS, which is another type of preventing front running or unintended market making. So there's all these ways to figure out how can you make a truly optimized, impressive DeFi product. And so when you're going into this space as one of these first gen protocols, you don't want to try and do everything at once. You just want to focus on what kind of friction can you remove for your users. So let's talk about how we at NEM applied all of this and all of these lessons into practice. So as I mentioned, NEM and Symbol are some of these examples of first era chains. And in order for them to continue to remain relevant and useful in 2021, they needed to reinvent themselves. So in June, we actually announced some pretty major changes and major innovations to the project. The first was moving to an entirely decentralized way of development and running the business. So incorporating as a DAO and really embracing a DAO. These also included adding zero knowledge proofs to the chain and embracing ZK rollups, so something we're working on for our first network upgrade. Introducing liquidity provision for our users, so each individual node in the network can maintain their own asset pairings. And introducing subchains, which are these purpose-designed chains for specific transaction types. So in Symbol, one of the things we do is we batch transactions based upon either the type of transaction they are, which can be defined by the user in a plugin. We're also looking to introduce aggregation by data. So say that you're an individual who wants to make a speculation that cat NFTs are going to be highly relevant 3 months from now, and they're going to go blow up in the space. You can actually create your own order on Symbol once we've released this upgrade that would allow you to aggregate all of the data related to cat, images, videos, whatever, all of the data related to that keyword, and actually make a futures contract based on that bet. So we're doing some really creative stuff on that financial side. The other thing we've introduced is Symbol does not have Turing complete smart contracts. Instead, it's a non-Turing complete platform, which was really important to the initial design ethos of the core team, as well as is going to become increasingly important as you're embracing, a financial market. So one of the things that we do instead is we have individual opcodes that have both a base fee as well as a dynamic adjusted fee. So this demand for an individual transaction type or an individual opcode, is adjusted based on network use. So operators are able to benefit from in-demand transaction types, and this incentivizes new, potentially healthy or useful transaction types to be created. So again, applying those principles of great mechanism design. So it remains to be seen whether we'll be successful. We have a long road ahead of us, and I'm actually quite excited to see what happens as NEM attempts to reinvent itself and where it's going to be 2, 3, 4 years from now. But I do believe that, protocols now need to actively embrace DeFi, actively start applying it, focus on chain interoperability, because this is the only way to remain relevant with the up and coming way that the space is evolving. And so, if we do our job right, hopefully it will look something like this. Thank you very much. Yeah, so one of the things we also announced is that NEM, which was NIS1, NIS1, NEM will actually become a subchain of Symbol. So rather than maintaining two separate code bases, rather than splitting the community and having these two diversified assets, instead NEM will come under Symbol. The entire chain will just be almost emulated inside the protocol. This allows it to take a benefit of the scalability of Symbol and all of the architecture and innovation we've done there. And what we're intending to do with NEM, the token, is actually have it be the base transaction type for any type of royalties on chain. So anytime a user wants to call a royalty transaction type, that will be the underlying ZEM or NEM token kicking off that transaction type. So again, for the folks that may be really familiar with Ethereum, instead of opcodes or smart contracts, what all of our logic and all of our programmability and Symbol is in plugins, which are user created, and nodes can choose to serve or run, and transaction types. So you're able to select your own transaction type and aggregate that together to create your own applications, either on-chain or off-chain. Sometimes it's because projects have tried to leap ahead too soon. So there's 3 stages to building a protocol. And in your first stage, you're trying to find product market fit. So it's not enough to just, add in great mechanism design and add in great assets. You also have to have a really powerful vision, something that's unique in the space. And you have to build a, product market fit and work around that. Too often projects will struggle if they jump away from product market fit and try to move immediately into decentralizing from the get-go. It never works. So it's a combination of knowing how to slowly build and grow your protocol. And again, protocols have a 10-year life cycle. I think most people forget that. You don't actually reach market demand in in your first or second year of operation. 5 years at best. So it's a combination of that. And then what most projects forget is to focus on the tech. At the heart of this space is technology. And so if you don't have a engineering first mindset, if you don't speak about the tech, if you're not able to attract other developers and hold your own among technical peers, you will never remain relevant and you will drop off and you won't be able to compete alongside the likes of Ethereum or Solana. So I think it's partly technology, it's partly knowing where you are in your life cycle and keeping to that and knowing when to move to the next stage of building a protocol. And then following these 3, key ingredients for success: great assets, great UX, human-centric design, and ensuring you have great mechanism design.